times when we look at one particular version or translation of the Bible and a particular passage reads two different ways, and based upon the reading or even the translation of that passage, we can get two very different meanings. What I want to use an example of this is in Luke chapter 17, looking at verse 21 in particular. But before we actually get into the text itself, we want to read the entire, not all, just a couple of verses to kind of get us into the context of what's going on, starting at verse number 20. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the NASB. I'm going to look at the NASB 1995 updated edition, and I'm going to compare that to the King James version of the Bible. Now, this wasn't the latest, the 20, I believe they updated it in 2011, updated the King James version to the new King James version. But nevertheless, the reading of this particular verse is the same. And we're going to take, reason why I'm taking the KJV is because it's one of the most popular ones, the King James version. So I'm going to start and read this particular passage from the NASB, okay? Verse 20. Now, having been questioned by the Pharisees as to when the kingdom of God was coming, he answered them and said, the kingdom of God is not coming with signs to be observed, nor will they say, look, here it is, or there it is. For behold, the kingdom of God is in your midst. Now, notice that statement. The kingdom of God, Jesus says, is in your midst. Now, that was the NASB. Now, turning to the King James version, looking at this same point, verse number 20 again. And when he was demanded of the Pharisees when the kingdom of God should come, he answered them and said, the kingdom of God cometh not with observation. Okay, so now it reads a little bit different. However, the meaning of verse 20 in comparison to, that is in the King James version, in comparison to the New American Standard Version, they're basically the same. The meaning is the same, but it's in verse 21 that the meanings have a radical difference or a radical meaning. So let's read 21 from the King James Version. Neither shall they say, lo here or lo there, for behold, the kingdom of God is within you. Now notice what it says again, is within you. That meaning is a radically different meaning than the kingdom of God from the NASB is in your midst. Now, where do these things come from? First, we have to look at the underlining text of that is the Greek text, the Greek text from the which we have the NASB version of the Bible. And this comes from, I believe it's Nestle Allen, the 26th edition, and United Bible Society, the 3rd edition. That Greek text is from the which we get our English translation for the NASB. And now the key part about it, before I get into that, hold on, getting a little excited. Also, too, with respect to the King James version of the Bible, this comes from the Textus Receptus. That is Stephanus's Textus Receptus. This is the Greek text that the New Testament is based on from the King James version. Now, the point that we're concentrating on here is in the very end, in verse number 21. The kingdom of God is, NASB, in your midst. King James version is within you. Now, we have to look at the underlying Greek words here. And the key thing that we'll observe even here is they are the same words. That is, and I'm not going to go through all of the Greek text that's involved in that particular verse, but I'm going to simply look at, for behold, the kingdom of God is in your midst. And so for the NASB, we just simply have Idu gar he basileia tu theu, and here's the key, entos humon estin. That is, entos humon estin, in or within of you is. Then that's the idea. That is in your midst. That's how they translate that. And this becomes a very close similarity to the Greek text that is used in Stephanus's text. And so he just says, gar e basale, basalea tu theu, for the kingdom of God. And again, notice, in tos humon estin. It is the same identical Greek words, but nevertheless, NASB translates it in your midst, and King James Version translates it is within you. Now, the word that is bringing about so much confusion is the word entos. And this particular word we'll see is used only a couple of times in the New Testament, in the Greek New Testament. It is used in Matthew chapter 23 when Jesus is upbraiding the Pharisees when he says, clean the inside of the cup so that the outside might be clean. That in Matthew, so the word used for inside of the cup is entos here. And the second time that particular word is used is right here in Luke 17 and verse number 21. And notice we said in Matthew 23, entos is used for the inside of the cup. But here, is it as King James Version is translating it, the kingdom of God is within you. This brings us to another I don't want to say understanding, but another means by which we need to understand translation, or if we are doing translation, another meaning by which we translate, and that is in the meaning of the context, in the meaning of the context. Now, I'm not going to get into all of the context that is involved, but let's look at, because it is the near context. In other words, what is Jesus, or what is going on? What is the writer talking about when he begins to use a particular word or phrase? Because we want to bring clarification. Is the kingdom of God among you, or that is in your midst, or is the kingdom of God within you? Because the understanding have radical interpretations. That is, let me say this before we even get there. If the kingdom of God is in your midst, Jesus is pointing to, and even Luke is pointing to, something apart from these people, something apart from whomever Jesus is talking about. Okay. And Jesus here is talking to the Pharisees. This is critically important. He's talking to the Pharisees, and thus by stating the kingdom of God is in your midst, he is not talking about them per se. The kingdom of God is not so much as related to them by being inside of them, but being amongst them. Now, with respect to the King James Version translation, the kingdom of God is within you. This statement brings the interpretation of a spiritualization of the kingdom of God. That is, the kingdom of God spiritually is inside of you. Now, the critical thing, and I mean critical, that we need to understand about this translation is we understand whom Jesus is speaking to. He is talking to the Pharisees. And what has the scriptures consistently been saying about the Pharisees? They rejected Jesus. They rejected the message. Thus, they rejected salvation. And so thus, if the kingdom of God is this spiritual kingdom is within, this creates a strange conundrum. Here we have wicked men who have been seeking to kill Jesus, and Jesus has made the statement that the kingdom of God is within them. No, this cannot be the case. But before we get into final answer, and I've just about answered the question, we have to understand the broader context. What has just happened? There were lepers that came to Jesus. I believe there were 10 lepers came to Jesus. Jesus healed those particular lepers. One leper came back to give thanksgiving to Jesus for what he has done. And then after that, the Pharisees, we see Luke continuing to tell us what the Pharisees began to ask Jesus the question about the kingdom. So your question should become, how is the relationship of these lepers who were healed? Is that in any way related to the Pharisees and their questions about the coming kingdom of God? The answer is yes. Why? For remember now, even though leprosy was spoken of in the book of Leviticus, to a great extent, no one, with the exception of Miriam and Naaman, was healed of leprosy. And in each case, no man healed them. Notice what I said. Miriam was healed by God. Naaman was healed directly by God. No human being was healed by another man, prophet or whatever, of leprosy. Thus, it was believed by the Pharisees, it was common teaching in the time of Jesus, that when the Messiah should come, only he would have the power to heal leprosy. And so what has happened? These Pharisees have heard and witnessed all how Jesus heals these lepers. And so naturally, Jesus has been preaching and proclaiming himself to be the Messiah, and that the kingdom of God has come, that is, in his presence. Jesus himself brings the kingdom of God. And so therefore, the Pharisees, wanting to know, seeing that Jesus just did this remarkable miracle of healing those particular lepers, is now the kingdom about to be set up? What will be the signs? How can we know if you are this Messiah, can we know when the kingdom of God will be set up? And that's the idea. And Jesus responds, what? The kingdom of God does not come with signs. What? People will not be able to say, look over here, look over there. For the kingdom, for behold, that's our key. The kingdom of God is in your midst. Not the kingdom of God is within you. So thus, the way that the King James Version translate this is within you, is improper, because number one, we must see the broader context of what's going on. And thus we extend, notice what I said, we extend our reading to understand whether Jesus was talking about the kingdom being within them, or Jesus talking about himself. He is the kingdom of God. By his presence, the kingdom of God is present with them. By his power, the kingdom of God is being manifested with them. So thus, in the reference to kingdom of God, Jesus was talking about himself, not some spiritualization of something that was within them, that is, these crooked Pharisees. And that broader context, verse 22. And he said to the disciples, the days will come when you will long to see one of the days of the Son of Man, and you will not see it. Notice again, let's keep going. They will say to you, look there, look here, do not go away. So Jesus began to speak about the time when people would desire his presence once again. They would desire Jesus to be in their midst once again, saying what? Look at the same language here that was used in verse 21. Look here, or there it is. In the same way, he said there will be a time when people will be desiring his presence once again, saying, look over here, or look over there. So what do we see? In understanding and even in translating text, especially in dealing with words that are not used too often, and even, notice what I said, and even when those words are used a number of times, this particular word that we've been talking about, entos, that is, entos humon esteem. Should it be translated, kingdom of God is in your midst or within you? Whenever we're looking for translation, always understand that it is the context. It is the context of the passage that governs the translation. Even though the same word might be used in this context. Again, that word entos used in Matthew 23, inside the cup. But clearly, the way that Luke is using this particular word, Jesus is not referring to something within hypocritical, unsaved Pharisees. They are not saved. This is not a spiritualization of the kingdom. No, Jesus is referring to himself. The Messiah is amongst you right now. And because you reject him now, one day you will be desiring for him to be in your midst again. All right. See you next time.